Hello, today we're going to share on the Last Supper and the Crucifixion of Christ. That would be within the Holy Week, Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday. And so the Last Supper and Crucifixion, Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday. This is the Holy Week, within the Holy Week. So Thursday we have the commemoration of the Last Supper and the establishment of the sacrament of the Eucharist. During the supper, Jesus shared with the apostles. He blessed the bread and said, "This is my body." Then he took the cup of wine and he blessed the wine and said, "This is my blood." So this was the establishment, the beginning of the establishment of the Eucharist. The sacrament of the Eucharist, or the sacrament of the body and blood of Christ. And with this, so Jesus would share his body and blood with us and grant us life. Grant us the life like his. And also would nourish our life through his body and blood. So we need to remember this. It's a very important occasion, the establishment of the sacrament of the Eucharist. But how can we eat a human flesh and blood, although it is not really the human body and blood, but it is the real Jesus body and blood? So how can we think about this? We need to look at the mother, sharing, using her flesh and her blood to grow the fetus in her womb. His body and blood, her own body and blood. And the fetus, the baby, has the body and blood, the flesh and blood of the mother. So this is something that we talk about. And Jesus was not talking about this, but his life. The body and blood signifies life. So Jesus was sharing his life to give us life, sharing his life to nourish our life. And the mother shared her blood, flesh and blood, her body and blood, and give it to the baby in her womb. And when when the baby is born, the mother needs to continue to share her body and blood. And how? Through her milk, the milk, mother's milk, through her breast milk. Very important food, the perfect food for a newborn baby. So she would continue to share her body and blood, her flesh and blood through her breast milk to nourish the baby. So we can think about this to really understand the sharing of body and blood is a real thing. It's not just something in the air, but it's something real. Humanly real. But Jesus was sharing his body in a sacramental way. Body and blood in a sacramental way. So while they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." So Jesus established the sacrament of the Eucharist, the sacrament of his body and blood, the sacrament of the body and blood of Christ, and gives his life for our life and nourish our life in that way. So that is the Eucharist, and the Last Supper, it happened at the Last Supper. But St. John did not talk about this. He talked about the Last Supper, but he did not talk about the Eucharist. What he talked about was the washing of the feet. Washing of the feet. So Jesus knew that his hour had come to pass from this world, that he knew he was going to die. But after he died, he would return to the Father, to God the Father. So he will pass away from this world to the Father. And here, the Gospel of St. John talked about washing of the feet and mutual love. So it was an important point that would be related closely with the Eucharist. But is also physically done, something physically done. He loved his own, that means his apostles, his disciples in the world, and loved them to the end. So he loved them, but not temporarily, forever, to the end. So during supper, fully aware that the Father, God the Father, had put everything into his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. Coming from God the Father, returning to God the Father. He rose from the supper and took off his garments and began to wash the disciples' feet and dry them with a towel. I have summarized St. John's Gospel so that we can have it on one page. So he washed the disciples' feet. When he came to Peter, Peter said, "No, you can't do this to me. I can't receive this." He was uncomfortable. But Jesus said, "If you don't allow me to wash your feet, you have nothing to do with me." So Peter accepted. Then and Jesus washed all of their feet, all of them. Then he said, "You call me teacher and master, and rightly so. If I have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. I have given you a model to follow, so that as I have done for you, you should also do." So Jesus was doing this to teach the apostles, the disciples, to wash one another's feet, to serve one another. And so he said, "You must do as I did." So Jesus did it himself, and he wanted them to follow. Then Jesus said, "I give you a new commandment. Love one another as I have loved you." And here it's a new commandment, because he was not just talking, Jesus was not just talking about loving one another, but loving one another as he loved us. So this is important. And so a new commandment. As I have loved you, you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. So if we really do this, then we will be a witness to Jesus and his love and our mutual love. Okay. So Jesus went then after supper, Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And he took Peter and Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. So he was not feeling happy, he was very sad, and he was sorrowful and feel troubled. So he was suffering in his heart. And then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." That means inside I'm suffering, 即係受苦到死咁滯。The meaning is that, to the point of death. Then he told Peter, John, and James, he said, "Stay here and keep watch with me." That means you must accompany me. He was dependent on the apostles accompanying him in his sorrow and troubled heart. So going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." So Jesus was finding it very hard to take. So he prayed that God the Father will take it away from him. But he knew he could not do this, so he said, "But not as I will, but as you will." That means Jesus would follow the will of the Father. Then he prayed like that, then he returned to his disciples, and what did he find? Found them sleeping. And he said, "Could you not accompany me for 1 hour?" Then he asked Peter, "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Then he went away a second time and prayed. So the apostles were weak. They could not accompany him. And he prayed a second time, the same thing really. "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done. So his prayer is the same. If I still have to drink this cup, then I will follow your will. And when he came back again, he found them sleeping. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. So this was a very important thing for Jesus in his accepting his suffering and dying on the cross. So then Judas arrived with a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, and he said to them, "The one I kiss is the man to arrest." So he kissed Jesus, to betray Jesus. And going to Jesus, Jesus said, "Greetings, Rabbi," that means teacher, and kissed him. Then the man seized Jesus and took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where teachers of the law and elders had assembled. So these were the people behind. And Jesus, then Peter followed right up to the courtyard. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. So they want to kill him. And that would happen on Good Friday. We will talk about Good Friday and then the death of Christ. And Judas was sorry for selling Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, so he wanted to give it back to the high priest, but he said, "It's yours, not ours." Then he said, "Jesus is innocent. I don't want it." He said, "It's your business." And they threw it away. He did not want to continue to keep the money. And then he hanged himself. He was sorry. And so Jesus was, they decided to whip Jesus and carry the cross. And Jesus was suffering bodily, in his body. But he was also suffering in the spirit, in the heart, because Peter would deny him 3 times. Judas betrayed him. So he was very sad, and so he was suffering in body and soul. Then Good Friday, Jesus died on Good Friday, and John was there with his mother, and he asked them to take care of each other as mother and son. And there are some women who also came. And Jesus offered himself to the Father and died. So he died on Good Friday, he died on the cross. Then those of Arimathea took Jesus' body from the cross, wrapped it in clean linen cloth, and placed Jesus in his own tomb that he had cut out from the rock, and rolled a big stone in front to the tomb, in front of the entrance. And so we will finish this, and the next we will talk about the resurrection So this is a very important part of the Holy Week, and it's the coming to the highest point of the whole liturgical year. So you must we must really give importance to this. Okay, so God bless.